Good morning. Morning. See, that wasn't said enthusiastically, and I want you to notice why. There's a pressure that can come into a room, into a mind, into a conversation, that makes even the holiest word sound tired. Fear does that. It sits on the breath. It flattens the tone. It takes your prayer and turns it into a recitation, well-rehearsed, well-meant, and yet strangely powerless. And, this matters today. Not because of headlines or seasons, but because right here, in the very first minutes when fear shows its face, something decisive happens. I mean exactly that. The first minutes decide the day's consciousness. Now, only once in a great while do I feel I must say, there is no subject more important than this. But this morning I must say it. There is no subject more important than what you do in those first minutes of fear. Not what you do after a committee meeting. Not what you do after 3 phone calls and an aspirin. Those first minutes. That is where you either become an effect, pushed and pulled by suggestion, or you stand as cause, unmoved, quiet, and therefore operative. I am not going to offer you a new belief. I am not going to offer you a longer prayer, a louder affirmation, or a brighter mood. The promise is much simpler and, to the intellect, more infuriating. There is one prayer of grace that silences fear in minutes. Not because the syllables are magic, not because the cadence is superior, because it is not, in fact, words at all. It is an inner act, so brief, so complete, that fear loses its audience and collapses. Now here is the obstacle, and I must put it plainly. Trying to understand this with the intellect makes it an absolute impossibility. Fear loves argument. It feeds on it. If you bring your clever sentences to fear, fear will answer them all day. It will reason with you until you are exhausted, and then it will whisper one more plausible thought. That is why so many of you have prayed beautifully and slept poorly. You argued with a shadow and mistook the debate for deliverance. So then, where is the opening? The prayer of grace isn't a speech to fear. It is a silence in which fear cannot complete its sentence. In other words, we will not be improving language. We will be withdrawing the listener. We will be stopping the personal struggle, yielding personal control, and abiding, yes, as I am, until the storm has no premise. Before we are through, you will know how to enter that silence in 2 or 3 minutes, and you will prove for yourself that fear is not overcome by better words. It is outshone when you consent to grace. For now, hold this. The first minutes are everything, and silence is the door. Now, what is it you are calling fear? I must have you look at this plainly, because if you are wrestling with a false object, you can wrestle all night and never touch the thing itself. Fear, as it comes to you, is not a tiger in the room. It is a claim in consciousness. It is a suggestion, subtle, quick, and with a tone that mimics your own voice, saying, I am alone. I am vulnerable. I am an effect at the mercy of causes. I mean exactly that. Fear presents not a fact, but an identification. You as effect, everything else as cause. Notice how efficiently it recruits the senses. A headline flashes, numbers, graphs, an expert's tone, and at once the body takes the cue. The breath shortens, the stomach tightens, the skin prickles. A memory arises of the last time you were hurt. An imagination runs ahead to the next time you might be. The mind arranges these like a courtroom. Exhibit A, Exhibit B, Exhibit C. But all of this, all of it, is interpreted through concept. The organ called I does not deliver truth. It delivers images. The organ called ear does not deliver certainty. It delivers vibrations. Concept translates them and then believes its own translation. In other words, fear borrows your own conceptual lens, paints the world in threat colors, and then says, "See? Proof." It is clever, but it is not power. Let me say it the way it must be said, so that you can stop wrestling smoke. Fear is not a power. Fear is not an entity. Fear is not a presence. It has no life of its own, no mind, no law. It is a misidentification accepted as fact. It lives as a mirage lives in your acceptance of yourself as effect. That is its entire food supply. The moment you accept the premise, "I am at the mercy of what happens," you have set a stage on which fear can act. Withdraw that premise, and it has no entrance. Here is the practical problem. If you fight fear as if it were a something, you just promoted it. You gave it status. You put it in the ring as an opponent worthy of your blows, and now it is as big as your attention. If you try to reason it away, you keep it on a ventilator called argument. Sentence after sentence, theory after theory, you have not removed the patient. You have improved the oxygen. That is why, after long debates with yourself at 2 a.m., you fall asleep from fatigue, not from freedom. So what are we to do? We must see that fear persists only while you accept the false identity of being an effect. That is the root. Therefore, the method cannot be combat. It cannot be louder words, stronger will, or better logic. The method must be identification, a shift. Out of the posture, "things happen to me," into the realization, "I am the living cause from which peace, order, and right activity appear." Do you not see? Until identity is corrected, evidence will keep rearranging its costumes, and your senses will keep testifying. But once identity is known, not said, the testimony changes. Not because you won an argument, but because the court has been dismissed. We are on our way there. Keep close to this. We are not conquering a power. We are ceasing to be its audience by no longer agreeing to be an effect. Now we come to the secret itself. And I'm going to ask you to hear this not as a new idea, but as the one idea you have always known and somehow postponed. The secret of life lies in right identification. All the error, fear, lack, loneliness, sickness, rests on one ignorance only. Ignorance of what you are. Not who your parents were, not what your bank says, not what the calendar calls you. What you are. "I am afraid" is not a condition. It is a confession of identity. Do you see that? The words are an altar where you place yourself as effect, small, separate, exposed, and then all the senses rush in to serve that altar with evidence. Now here is the pivot. It is not "God will help me." That is distance. That is two. That is tomorrow. The truth is, that which I am seeking, I am. I mean exactly that. The peace I want is the nature of my being. The safety I crave is the activity of my life. The wisdom I hope for is the light I am. I am is not bravado. It is not positive thinking. It is not a louder voice on top of a frightened whisper. I am is the name of being. The presence before any storyline, before any weather in the mind, before fear can compose a sentence. I am the life. I am the light. It is not a human claim. It is a recognition. It is not a boast. It is a bow. And let me be as clear as I can be about what this is not. It is not self-will stiffening its back. It is not the personal mind taking control, organizing outcomes, manipulating thoughts. That is the same old effect trying to pose as cause. This is surrender. Yield. Lay down the little sovereignty that never worked and cannot work, and relax as what already is. In other words, stop composing prayers to a distant power and let the prayer happen as realization. I am. Now, if prayer is the realization of grace, and it is, then the one prayer of grace cannot be a string of syllables. It must be an inner movement, quick and complete, out of I am afraid into I am. A stop, a yielding, an abiding. Beyond words, because words live in time, and grace lives as presence. You do not add anything. You recognize. You do not persuade anything. You consent. Try this in the smallest way when the next flutter comes. Do not dress it up. Do not argue. Just notice the false altar. I am at the mercy of, and refuse it, not by force, but by identity. Rest back into I am, and let the storyline fall for lack of a narrator. The cure is not changing circumstances. It is changing identification to I am. And when identification is right, the forms take care of themselves. Quietly, naturally, as fruit follows life. Now comes the part that frustrates many of you, and I understand it because I lived there. You have prayed hard. You have chosen beautiful phrases. You have said them with sincerity. And still the current of fear kept moving underneath, like a river under ice. And so you concluded, perhaps, that prayer does not work, or that you are not good at it. Neither is true. What failed was not prayer. What failed was petition as prayer. You addressed a distant power, asked for conditions to be altered, and remained, without noticing it, identified as the one in need, the one at the mercy of circumstance. That is still effect language, and effect language cannot touch cause. I mean exactly that. Fear is motion in the mental field. Fear is rehearsal. It rehearses danger. It rehearses defense. It rehearses speeches you will never give to people you may never meet. Every new sentence you offer into that wind becomes a new battleground. Speak, it will be all right, and fear answers, but what if? Assert, I am safe, and fear says, prove it. Bring 5 arguments, it brings 6. Why? Because you supplied it with a surface to strike. Words are surfaces. Fear is friction. And you can keep polishing sentences for hours while the friction continues, heating the mind, tightening the body, not because you are wicked or foolish, but because you have remained in the realm where fear operates, in the traffic of thought. Now let us be fair to the intellect. In its own province, it is serviceable. Balance a ledger with it. Build a bridge with it. Plan a harvest with it. But do not ask it to realize grace. The intellect can describe grace. It can compare quotations about grace. It can craft a syllabus and a bibliography of grace. But it cannot enter grace. Why? Because grace is not a topic. Grace is presence. Presence cannot be reached by the faculty that stands apart to measure and discuss. Presence is realized by that within you, which is presence itself. In other words, the mind that debates cannot know the silence that is before debate. Therefore, the one prayer of grace cannot be a request, cannot be a chant. cannot be a longer or shorter string of syllables. It is the inner stop that ceases the personal motion. It is the yield that lays down private control. It is the abiding as I am, until the sense of being two, me here, God there, thins and dissolves. And there is simply presence, knowing itself as peace. No sound may accompany it, and yet it is the most operative act you ever perform, because it is not performed by a person. It is consent to what is already true. And you will prove, as surely as you prove that a light turns on when a switch is thrown, that fear cannot argue with silence. It has no handhold there. It has no sentence to twist, no image to color, no memory to awaken. Withdraw the listener, and the lecture stops. Unplug the fan, and the wind is gone. Not fought down, gone. So now, we must taste this. Not think it, not admire it. Taste it. In a moment, I will ask you to close your eyes. Not to escape the world, but to withdraw the surface on which fear writes. We will not improve our words. We will fall beneath them. We will let grace be what it is, here, and we will rest, as I am, until the motion quiets for lack of a mover. Then you will understand, not because I have convinced you, but because you have been. Close your eyes for a moment, not dramatically, just gently. Not to escape anything, but to let the surface quiet. Let the hands rest exactly as they are. Let the breath do as it wishes. We are not starting a project. We are ceasing one. Now, in this first movement, stop. Discontinue the mental enterprise of fixing. Let the sentences that just began to gather fall where they are. Recognize fear, if it is present, as a suggestion, not a verdict. It says, you are at the mercy of. Notice the tone. Notice how it tries to borrow your name. And now, without answering it, let the body be felt as simple sensation. Warmth, weight, contact, without interpreting. Not tight or bad, merely sensation noticed. You are not improving the body. You are ceasing to label it. Do you see? Already the wind lessens when you do not offer it a surface. This takes a minute, perhaps two. Do not count. Just stop. Now we move, quietly, into the second movement. Yield. Inwardly, release personal possession of life, not as a performance, as truth. Father, I can of mine own self do nothing. Let that be not a sentence, but a surrender. Feel what it is to retire from the post of controller, fixer, and worrier. Lay down the private government. You cannot run a universe. You cannot even run a heartbeat. Let the management go back to its owner. Say nothing if you wish. Bow within. I mean exactly that. Bow. This is not weakness. This is honesty. As you yield, notice that something you did not start continues. Breath, awareness, being itself. The river runs whether you splash or not. Give it back and rest from the strain of authorship. And now, the third movement. Abide. Rest as I am. Not a phrase to repeat, a fact to feel. Before any thought, there is the simple fact that you are. Just that. Being. No name needed. No history required. Let grace be present without your effort to hold it. Allow a clear silence to stand between you and the claim that just a moment ago was arguing. Not a wall of resistance, an atmosphere without an audience. Sit as that. Let the mind do what it will on the edges. You remain as the quiet center from which presence shines. 2 minutes like this are wealth. You are not manufacturing peace. You are consenting to what is already here. How do you know this prayer has done its work? You do not need a dramatic sign. Fear does not need to be killed. It simply has no one to talk to. Its argument, spoken into an empty room, fades for lack of a listener. You rise, if you choose to rise, without a battle story. Only with a steadiness that was not purchased, only revealed. Remember the pattern. Stop, yield, abide. You have just practiced the one prayer of grace. Minutes, not hours. Consent, not force. And as often as fear returns, you do not meet it with sentences. You return to this inner act until even its entrance grows shy in the presence of I am. Now, if you have even for a minute rested as that silence, we can speak of the law behind it. And this is the law. As long as you seek peace as an effect, something to get, to feel, to verify, you have agreed to be an effect. You have put yourself downstream, and you will live by weather. The moment you abide in grace as I am, the entire axis reverses. You stand as cause. Do you see? Not a superior person. Cause. The living principle from which the forms called calm, clarity, order appear. Let me bring it down to the ground so that you cannot miss it. The oranges do not constitute supply. The tree constitutes supply. The life of the tree, rooted, unseen, quietly operative, is the cause. The oranges are fruitage. Now translate this. Smooth breathing, a relaxed stomach, a quieter headline. These are oranges. They are not peace, they are fruitage. Peace is grace itself, the life of your being, the I am. If you go about collecting oranges, 5 reassuring texts, 6 news refreshes, 4 body checks, you may fill a basket for an hour, and yet at sundown you will find yourself poor again because you never owned the tree. I mean exactly that. Chasing reassurance is a poverty program. It never ends because effects do not make a cause. Here is the trap as it plays out every day. The flutter comes. You reach for the phone. You ask a friend, "Tell me it's all right." You scan the body, take a measurement, fix a meaning, then take another. Each little calm that follows feels like wealth, but it is borrowed fruit. It was ripened by someone else's sentence, by a chemical ebb, by the clock, and so it spoils. Then the mind, obedient to its training, goes out again with the ladder in the bag. That is living as an effect. Prayer, true prayer, is the reversal. It does not change God's attitude toward you. God has no attitude toward you separate from His own being as you. Prayer changes your identification. It reveals the presence already functioning as your life. In other words, you are not coaxing a mood to descend. You are letting cause be known as I am, and watching the fruit take care of itself. You do not get peace. You do not get life. You do not get supply. You are peace as grace. You are life as consciousness. You are supply as the law of your being. And then calm, health, provision appear as the natural fruitage of that realization. When you accept this, accept it not as a pretty philosophy, but as law. You stop negotiating with fear. You stop buying it coffee and asking for terms. You retire from the marketplace of effects. You go within. You abide as I am. And you let the invisible root do what only a root can do. Then fear is exposed as a false effect, an echo without a voice, a wind from a fan you have already unplugged. And from there, living becomes very simple. Stay at the tree and let the oranges be oranges. Now I know the objection that is already standing up in the back row. All right, perhaps fear is a suggestion, but this is in my chest. This is in my stomach. This is real. I do not ask you to deny that a sensation is present. I ask you to question its identity. The senses report. Concept interprets. Then the interpretation borrows your name and says, I am afraid. I mean exactly that. What you are calling fear is sensation plus a story, and it is the story that gives the sensation its badge and its gun. We must come to this mystery of body, not to make you clever about it, but to free you in it. You have lived as if you were inside a body, like a tenant in a small, drafty house. You knock on the walls, you test the locks, you listen for burglars. But the truth is otherwise. You are not in body. Body is embraced in you. You are consciousness, and within consciousness, the idea body appears and functions as instrument, as temple, as visibility. This that you see, this that you touch, is a concept of body. Changeable, conditioned by belief, educated by the world's notions of age and danger. The spiritual embodiment, the true form, is the activity of life itself as your being. It never trembles. It never gasps. It never breaks. Do you see the turn? When you identify as the tenant, every creak is threat. When you realize you are the field in which the house appears, creaks are sounds, not sentences. This is why the ancient words about flesh have seemed to contradict themselves. On one page, flesh cannot inherit the kingdom. On another, the Word is made flesh. Elsewhere, God is seen in flesh. Take the word concept there instead of flesh, and the riddle opens. The mortal concept of body, the world's picture, does not inherit reality. It cannot. But the living Word, realized within, appears as form, an improved concept, sound and useful, God manifest at the level where the eye can see. In other words, the throb in the chest is not an oracle. It is a sensation. The authority comes from the concept you pin to it. Withdraw the pin, and it is only movement inside an embraced instrument. How then does the one prayer of grace meet what seems physical? Not by denial, not by resistance. Stop. Discontinue the practice of naming and grading sensation. Warmth, weight, motion. Let them be just that, without a badge. Yield. Retire from personal ownership of body. Father, I can of mine own self do nothing, not a heartbeat. Let the government rest where it always was. And then abide. Rest as I am, the awareness in which the sensations come and go like ripples on a lake that is not disturbed by its surface. Do you not notice? The moment the narrative is unfed, the sensation loses its voice. It may move, you do not move with it. It may speak, you do not translate it into doom. Presence stands, and feeling becomes weather, not law. And what follows? Without your supervision, breath finds its rhythm. Without your bargaining, the world's face softens. The call returns kindly. The door that seemed shut opens. But remember our law. Those are oranges. The cause is identity. When you cease feeding the concept, me in a body at the mercy of forces, the concept dissolves at its root, and form adjusts to the realized fact. Fear may appear as sensation, yes. It is sustained as concept. And grace, realized as I am, dissolves the concept so completely that even the body learns a new story by having none at all. Now, the minute fear returns, and it will, as habit, as echo, do not call that failure. Call it the old tenant knocking, asking for its room back. Habit knocks. Identity answers. If you take the knock as a verdict, you're back in the hallway, explaining yourself. If you recognize it as an old introduction, hello, I am the frightened one, you can smile inwardly and decline the role. I mean exactly that. Fear's recurrence is not power. It is persistence. It tries doors. Your consent is the only key. This is what it means to die daily. Not a tragic gesture, not the body harmed, not emotion suppressed. It is the quiet, practical release of a concept. Let the claim, I am the one in danger, I am the one who must manage outcomes, drop right there at the threshold. Let that self die. Not once for all, but as often as it presents itself. I die daily is simply, I refuse, again and again, to identify as effect. Each refusal is not willpower, it is honesty. The little sovereign never ruled. Why pretend? So take it into the street, the office, the kitchen. The text flashes, the voice rises, the memory stings. Here is your micro-sequence, and it takes a minute, perhaps 3. Notice the claim. I am at the mercy of. Do not debate, do not dress it up, do not answer the what-ifs with what-thens. Just withdraw the listener. Stop. Let the mental machinery idle. Yield. Give back the private government. Father, of mine own self I can do nothing. Abide. Rest as I am, the quiet presence before thought. 60 seconds if that is all you have at the red light. 120 while the phone rings. 180 before you press send. You are not building calm. You are recognizing cause. Light does not assemble itself. It shines when the switch is not blocked. Now the choice stands this plainly. Either you consent to fear's world as final, matter as master, chance as law, reaction as duty. Or you consent to grace as the only presence, I am as the cause of all that appears. The decision lies with you. Not once in a crisis and then retired to a frame on the wall. Hourly if needed. Minute by minute if the day is noisy. Half a dozen times between breakfast and lunch if the habit is strong. But not as struggle, as surrender. You cannot outshout a carnival. You can leave the fairground. You cannot win the argument. You can empty the room. And here again, so you will not postpone it. This shift occurs in minutes because nothing is manufactured. You are not pumping up a mood. You are recognizing the presence that never left. Fear loses its premise because the person it addressed has stepped out of costume. Unplug the fan and the wind is gone. Not subdued, gone. What grows from this daily dying? A different tone to your days. Less reflex, more response. Less hurry, more guidance. Fewer apologies uttered from agitation. More words spoken from authority that does not need volume. Even the body, held within you, learns a new tempo. Breath finds you before you look for it. Circumstances answer without theater. And you will remember. These are oranges. The wealth is the tree. Victory is not one dramatic moment. It is the repeated refusal to identify as the fearful self, the steady consent to grace, until the old tenant tires of knocking at a door that will not open. Now we must make this painfully practical, or you will leave here with inspiration that fades by supper. Study, as I use the word, is not reading. It is not stacking books, underlining, quoting. Study is the slow fire of contemplation, by which a sentence ceases to be letters and becomes your atmosphere. I am going to give you an assignment, and you will think I'm exaggerating, but I am not. Take one sentence and live with it for a year. Not a week, a year. Write it out. Put it on the mirror. Slip a copy in the wallet or purse. Make it the lock screen of the phone. And do not pass it quickly as if you knew it. You do not know it until you are it. Now choose your sentence. Only one. I am. Or, grace is present. Or, I and the Father are one. Or, if your temperament needs to kneel, I can of mine own self do nothing. Any one of these is an ocean. You cannot sound its depth in less than a year. I mean exactly that. If you change sentences every month, you will collect seashells and never touch water. Pick one, write it out neatly, place it where you will see it in the unguarded moments, by the kettle, on the dashboard, near the bedside, and let it find you. Here is what study means. You look at the sentence, and you do not recite, you allow. You let the words open into silence, and you lean into that silence the way a child leans into a mother's side, not explaining, just being held. Morning. Before the world comes to collect you, sit 3 minutes, 5 if you must. Stop, yield, abide. Let the sentence float in, then sink below it until the meaning is not in words, but in you. Midday. When the pace quickens and the old tenant taps, turn to the sentence, repeat the inner act, stop the machinery, yield the government, abide as I am. Night. Before sleep, give back the day. Let I can of mine own self do nothing retire your little monarchy. Let grace is present be the last climate you know before dreams. Do not make this a contest. No charts, no gold stars, no spiritual ambition. Ambition is the effect trying to promote itself to cause. The point is not achievement, the point is surrender. Letting grace be grace while you withdraw the pretense of personal authorship. If on some morning the sentence is flat, do not fault the ocean. Simply stand on the shore and listen. If on some afternoon tears come, do not collect them as proof. Let them dry in the same sun. Day by day the sentence will move from your lips to your mind, from your mind to your heart, from your heart to your very sense of being, until it is not something you remember, but the atmosphere you breathe without remembering. Then notice, quietly, that fear has lost its platform. It may still speak in the old tone. It is not believed. It may wave its exhibits. There is no court. One sentence, contemplated until it becomes consciousness, is the doorway into the silence where fear cannot live. And from that doorway, we will not walk out with speeches. We will let grace have the last word by having none. Now, before we part, gather the thread into one piece so there can be no doubt. Fear presented itself as pressure, as argument, as sensation. We discovered it lives only while you accept a false role, effect, the one at the mercy of narratives and weather. Right identification is the whole cure. From I am afraid to I am. Prayer, then, is not speech, but silence. The inner act of stop, yield, and abide, by which the personal motion ceases, the private government is returned, and presence stands as cause. From there, effects arrange themselves as fruitage. Concepts that kept the body and world trembling lose their root and fall. And in the minute fear knocks again, you practice a daily dying, refusing the costume of the fearful self and consenting to grace. Let us taste that once more, not as an exercise, but as the way we end. Close your eyes a moment. Stop. Let the machinery idle. Let every planned sentence drop where it is. Yield. Father, of mine own self I can do nothing. Give back the throne you never truly sat upon. Abide. Feel the simple fact before thought. I am. No phrase to hold, no scene to picture, no bargain to strike. Presence as presence. Stay just here, where there is nothing to prove and nothing to fear, because there is no one separate left to be afraid. 2 breaths. Quiet. Now, a gentle charge as you rise. Do not cling even to the relief that comes. Enjoy it, bless it, be grateful for every evidence, but do not grasp. The oranges are sweet. The tree is life. Be willing to see experiences come, to see them go, while grace remains. Unmoved, your very being. If a calm appears, receive it lightly. If a wave appears, let it break without translating it into a story. I mean exactly that. Let the world's weather be weather, while you rest as the sky that does not bargain with clouds. When you pass through the door, take this with you in the smallest units. At the sink, the stoplight, the threshold of a meeting. 1 minute. Stop. Yield. Abide. Not force. Consent. Not achievement. Recognition. 1 sentence on the mirror until it ceases to be letters and becomes air. And when fear asks for your audience, let silence answer. Grace does not fight fear, it outshines it. And you consent by resting as I am. We will end as we must, with fewer words than we began, and more life than we can say. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.